Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping are all set to hold their bilateral talks in 5 years on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit in Russia's Kazan. This comes after both India and China took significant steps to ease the border tensions between the neighboring countries. And the last time Prime Minister interacted with Xi Jinping was back in 2019 in Mahabalipuram in Tamil Nadu, just a few months before the military standoff at Galwan in June 2020, which led to multiple casualties. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has arrived at the BRICS Summit venue for the 16th BRICS Summit. Let's start off our conversation. Joining me on the telecast is Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. He is the former Foreign Secretary. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. And my first question about what is the indication and the impact of this meeting that is taking place between the Prime Minister and Xi Jinping after 5 long years, and that too on the sidelines of BRICS?
I think it will have a strong impact because it is the first step and a major step in terms of going back on the long road to some sort of normalization of our ties. I think to imagine that India and China can resolve all their differences would be a mistake. The best one can do is to try and live in as much peace as possible, calm the situation on the border, avoid incidents on the border of the kind that have occurred in the past, and eventually from the Chinese side and on our side, apart from disengagement, which is only the first step, there should be de-escalation and demilitarization or redeployment of forces to the positions they held in 2020.
Absolutely.
Now, we talk at the highest level between Modi and Xi Jinping. We'll lay down some markers in terms of how the two sides should proceed. See, the importance is that from our side, we are an open democratic society. It's not as if Modi is a dictator. But on the Xi Jinping side, it is a closed society. It is opaque. So the direction really has to come on from the top and everybody will fall in line. So if then Xi Jinping changes the track and forces the PLA to actually try and make genuine peace on the border with India to the extent that it is feasible, I think that will be very important. And they will give guidance. As you know, in the past also when the two leaders have met or foreign ministers have met, they always talk about the guidance given by their respective leaders. Now, I hope that the guidance that comes from Xi Jinping after this meeting will lay the foundations of a slow and steady improvement of India-China ties.
Right, absolutely. And you were specifically mentioning because this incident has happened just days after that formal communique has been had from the Ministry of External Affairs in India as well as from the Chinese Foreign Ministry that there have been talks. There is at this point of time status quo ante that has been found between both the countries when it comes to the military standoff in Galwan 2020. It commenced and up until now in 2024. The disengagement is what that has happened. There is de-escalation rightfully that was mentioned by you, demilitarization. Do you think this has been a carefully, cautiously orchestrated diplomatic exercise before the BRICS Summit? Therefore, a purposeful steps taken forward by both the countries for the heads of the states to then meet formally at the BRICS?
Well, actually, there are a lot of question marks because the bare minimum has been announced. Yes, the Foreign Secretary spoke about disengagement, but the Chief of Army Staff said that what has been agreed to will lead to disengagement. So it's not as if disengagement has already occurred. What they seem to have agreed is the basis for this disengagement. And the steps then will be taken progressively to disengage. And that's why the Chief of Army Staff will be very careful in stressing the need for trust. And that this trust will be slowly built after patrolling is resumed. And as he says, the two sides will then come face to face each other. This will, in due course, build trust in the sense they'll be able to monitor if some creeping encroachments are taking place or not taking place. So we are far away from any normalization of the situation on the border as existed before Galwan. The second point on which there is some lack of clarity, deliberate or otherwise, is about Demchok and Defsan.
Yeah.
Now, unofficial sources seem to suggest that both these places have been included in the process of disengagement, in the sense that the patrolling would be allowed. On the other hand, both the foreign secretary and the foreign minister, as well as the chief of army staff, has spoken about going back to the situation as existed in 2020. But in 2020, already we were denied patrolling in Depsang and in Demchok.
Yeah.
So I think this clarity is needed, and this will come out in due course, obviously.
Right. And why do you think that this development has taken place? It has taken 4 years for China to come about and cooperate with India in building this status quo, and why now?
Why now? Because a few things. Firstly, China is getting into more and more serious confrontation with the United States and Japan in the Western Pacific. On the Taiwan issue, things are hotting up. On the Philippines issue, things also are becoming more tense. United States is now a very clear policy of strengthening its alliances in the Indo-Pacific area. In fact, Japan has gone ahead to the extent of wanting NATO to establish its presence in the Western Pacific, and has actually asked for Quad to become a kind of a NATO outpost in the Indo-Pacific.
Yes.
So China can then see that the pressures are mounting, and there is a proposal for United States to deploy its intermediate range missiles in that area, which will be a serious strategic blow to China. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, with Trump coming, probably becoming president, and doing unpredictable things, applying 60% tariffs on Chinese goods and whatever else, China's economic situation, already in difficulty, will become worse. And the gains that they've been making from standoff with India are minimal. On the contrary, their whole stance that they are peacemaking and they want peace in Ukraine, they want peace in the Middle East, is belied by the fact that they don't want peace on the borders with India. The real major competitor of China in Asia. So, and I think it's also costing them. It's costing us a lot in terms of positioning and stationing our forces, but it's not as if it is cost-free for China either.
Okay.
So there may be a mixture of motives, and this BRICS summit was a good occasion where the leaders would be present, that some kind of a ice breaking should occur, and preceded by at the highest level, preceded by a resolution step by step of the problem of confrontation of the two forces on the border.
Okay.
So I think it's a mixture of many motives.
Yeah, I also want to touch upon the subject of the souring ties between India and Canada, with Justin Trudeau government further alienating India from the West. Now, there has been this entire fiasco about Niger. There also was discussion about this assassination, the attempted assassination plot, which India at this point of time has been forced to cooperate with the United States of America. Do you think Canada is then solely responsible for pushing India out of the Western cooperation hemisphere and then towards Russia and Iran and China, as the BRICS summit now symbolizes?
No, I think our problem with Canada long precedes the BRICS summit and what could be expected from this summit. I think Canada, as you know, Trudeau has single-handedly tried to destroy the India-Canada relationship. And now more and more things are coming out, how cavalier he has been in terms of dealing with this issue, going to the parliament last September and claiming that Indian agents were involved in the murder of Niger, and now admitting in the latest hearing before the Committee on Foreign Interference that he had no hard evidentiary proof. He just had an intelligence. So intelligence is not proof. And yet the risk of going public on this, obviously he was encouraged to do so by the United States because he's admitted that he got information from the Five Eyes, this intelligence from the Five Eyes. And now he says it also came from South Asian sources. He doesn't want to say Sikh extremist sources or Pakistani ISI sources, but he says South Asian sources. Now, what does South Asian sources mean? And then what he has, the manner in which he has destroyed the possibility of any back channel by first proposing to our Prime Minister at this meeting or this East Asia Summit in Laos that the two national security advisors should meet, which we agreed to, and where it was supposed to be an off-the-record meeting to try and find some kind of a modus vivendi to defuse the issue. He goes on to, brief the West Washington Post correspondents in London, why in London, and in New Delhi, and spills the beans altogether. Or what transpired there, and actually there is a hint that Amit Shah, the Home Minister, may be involved. So they're trying to do this kind of diplomacy and mudslinging through the media. This is not serious at all. So I think Trudeau has gone out on a limb altogether. He's very immature. He's got a terrible sense of entitlement. He's following the footsteps of his father, who also protected the Khalistani extremists. And now that he's in a minority government and elections are due next year, he wants to make sure that he doesn't lose the Sikh vote. He's very sensitive to that. And he earlier has been using Jagmeet Singh, who is a Khalistani. He got the portrait of Parmar in his office. And now, of course, they have Jagmeet Singh has withdrawn his support. But nevertheless, I think Trudeau believes that the gateway to getting the Sikh vote is through the Sikh extremists who have the money and who have the energy and who have the mobilizing power, he thinks, to get him those votes, because in few constituencies, the Sikh vote is very important. So it's vote bank politics, as we have rightly said.
In trying to garner the extremist votes in Canada, do you think the plot that has been played by Trudeau is going to backfire, especially when the Five Eyes have ganged up on India? There is China that Trudeau had colluded with to win the last elections. He is trying to, at this point of time, save himself from any kind of prosecution happening against him and his government and his party. And on one hand, you have the Ukraine war, where Russia continues to be in support, being shown support by China, and now Iran and North Korea. And on the other hand, in West Asia, you again have this axis that is being built. India stands in its neutrality, whether it is going to show its affiliation to Russia and Iran, because there has been a meeting that has been happened on the sidelines with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Pezeshkian. We've also seen that meeting with the Russian President, and now Xi Jinping. The message that is being sent out to the West and United States of America, is this to their benefit?
Well, after all, the United States has been engaging China. I mean, Blinken has visited China often. Sullivan has been to China. They've had a summit last year between Biden and Xi Jinping. So the fact that Prime Minister would be meeting Xi Jinping is essentially in the bilateral context, because we have a problem on our border, and we need to make sure that it should be diffused, not to our disadvantage, but to mutual advantage if possible. So this is sensible diplomacy. Now, the message that goes across to the West is precisely what India has been sending all this while, that we have strategic autonomy. We want to have a balanced relationship with all countries. When we say we want to be a Vishwa Mitra, it doesn't exclude anybody. We also want space with regard to the independence of our foreign policy making. And there are efforts on the part of the West and United States quite openly, but Europe too. Dilute your ties with Russia, reduce your military ties with Russia, don't buy oil from Russia. Then they attack us on democracy backsliding, on human rights violations, on minorities, on things like that. They don't recognize the fact that we've just had the biggest election ever in human history, democratic election ever in human history, so successfully done, without anybody saying that the election results are not acceptable or the election was not fair and free. And look at the United States, the kind of problem they're having with their election.
Right.
So I think the message will go that if you push India too hard in one direction, then India would have options to strengthen its ties with other countries with which we don't have these kind of problems. So this is a kind of diplomatic game we'll continue to play. If the United States and Canada and Europe think of putting pressures on us, then we can put counter pressures on them. We have the capacity to do so. And there is a bloc that is now building, which is a non-Western bloc, and which therefore, which is trying now to create a basis for cooperation amongst the non-Western countries, which is not dominated by the institutions, the ideas, and the preferences and the priorities of the hitherto dominant countries of the West, the G7
Yes.
or what have you. So I think it goes to the credit of Indian diplomacy that we are acquiring the suppleness and the strength and the self-confidence to play on the international stage in a way that maximizes our interests. We will continue to develop our ties with the United States, maximize the benefits we can derive from that relation based on mutuality of interest, but that does not mean that we will not defend and continue to preserve our ties with Russia. And if there's an opening with China, we'll take it. It's not going to happen easily with China, mind you, because China thinks India is a competitor, is the only competitor in Asia. And the fact that there is a little thaw, it doesn't mean like the Arctic Ocean, it will become totally ice-free.
Okay.
So let's wait.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Ambassador Sibal, for joining me on the telecast and sharing your views on this very important development that has taken place. Also on the telecast with me is Vijay Kranti, who is the chairman of CHASE. Thank you very much for joining me. And in fact,